Hi and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here or you are a returning subscriber, you're welcome once again to Juliet Pearl Couture. Now this tutorial is on the making of this Ankara shirt with an elastic waistband and a rope. It's a two-part tutorial and the other video will be on the making of the top. I believe this is something you would love to watch. Now let's get right into the cutting table. So here I have this piece of fabric here which is on fold, right side facing each other, and this is for my front shirt, the front block of my shirt. And the fold of this is a quarter of my hip measurement, which is 10.5 inches, plus 2 inches of ease and about 2.5 inches for my crotch extension. So on fold in total I have 15 inches here. The first measurement I'm going to be taking is my hemming allowance, and that's from the bottom of this fabric. So for my hemming allowance, I'm measuring 2 inches and I'm just going to straighten this line out. Now from this 2 inches mark, I'm going to be taking the full length of my shirt. The length of the shirt I'm working with is 19 inches. However, this shirt is going to have a 2 inches waistband, so I'm going to be subtracting that from 19 inches. So I'm just going to be making a mark on the 2 inches point as you can see on my tape. So in total I'm working with 17 inches right now, and I'm also just going to straighten this line out. From here, I'm going to be taking my crotch measurements, and how you calculate or you can get your crotch measurement is you divide your hip by 4 and then you add 1.5 inches or more. For me, my crotch measurement is 12.5 inches, so I'm just going to be marking 12.5 inches right there. And then I'm also going to be marking my hip line. That's from my waist to the depth of my waist to my hip, and that's 10 inches. So I have two lines marked out right now. And I'm also just going to straighten this out. So we have our hip line, we have our crotch, we have the hem, and of course the waistline here. Now on the crotch line, I'm going to be taking a quarter of my hip measurement, which is 10.5 inches, plus 2 inches for ease, and that makes it 12.5 inches. And then for crotch extension, just divide your hip measurement by 16 and whatever you get will be your crotch extension. For me, it's 2.5 inches. Whatever I have on my crotch line, excluding the extension, is what I'll be imputing on my waistline. So I have 12.5 on the crotch line. I'm also going to be marking 12.5 on my waistline, and then I will connect these lines together. And I'll also create my crotch curve from my hip line to the crotch extension. Now on the hemline, we would now want to determine the opening of your hem. So the total of whatever you have on fold, for me that's 15 inches like I said. I'm going to be dividing that into two, so that leaves me with 7.5 inches. I'm also going to be marking that 7.5 inches mark on the hemline. If you want your shirt to be free, whatever you have from your crotch, just take it all the way down. But for me, I want it to be a little bit fitted at the hemline. So what I'm going to be doing right now is, instead of marking the total 7.5 inches I have on both sides, I'm going to be minusing 1 inch from both sides. So I'm marking 6.5 inches on my hemline here, and then 6.5 inches here. So it's going to be a little bit fitted for me, and then I'll connect the lines and then connect it all the way to the crotch line like I'm doing. And this is pretty much it for the front piece of our Ankara shirt. However, before I proceed to cutting, I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch at the waistline, and this I will be using to attach the shirt to my waistband at the end of the day. So I'll just add 1/2 inch at the waistline there, connect the lines, and for every other thing I will cut as is. So I have another piece of fabric on fold, and what I'm just going to do is place my front piece on this piece of fabric, making sure that they align at the bottom and at the sides. Now this new piece of fabric will be for my back piece, and then the only difference is that it's going to be higher than the front piece, and it's going to be wider than the front piece by at least 2.5 or 3 inches, depending on how much you're coming out by on your crotch extension for the back. So I'm just extending the crotch extension from the front onto the back piece. And then at this waistline here, I'm going to be coming up 1 inch. So if you're on the bigger side, you may decide to come up by 1.5 inches or 2 inches. But then don't forget, this is actually an elastic waistband, so 1.5 would be just okay. Now from this 1.5 mark, I'm just going to be coming out by 2 inches all the way up until I get to the crotch extension for the back. So this is 2 inches and this is 2 inches. I'm also going to take 2 inches here, and then I'll connect it to the crotch extension for the back. At the sides here, I'm also going to be coming out by 2 inches. So basically, the back short is wider than the front by 2 inches for me. Then at this 1 inch point that we came up by, I'm now going to connect it all the way to the waist at this point. So from this point to this point, I'm just going to connect it using a straight line. And this is for our butt allowance. And then now we can proceed to cutting this out. Now, if you've watched up to this point, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you. So here we have now our front piece and then our back piece. I'm now going to take this to my sewing machine, and on this point, I'm going to run a stitch using 1/2 inch to join the front piece together. I'm also going to do the same thing at the back piece, 1/2 inch all the way to the crotch line. So after joining both sides, this is what it looks like. Now opening this up, now this is the front piece and this is the right side. What I've basically just done is on this point I've come down by 1 inch, and this is for attaching the pockets, and I'm just going to attach my pockets on the 1 inch mark, just below the 1 inch mark. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and run a straight stitch just like this from this point to that point. So you can hold this down with a pin so that it stays steady. I'm also going to be coming over to the other side as well. I'll come down 1 inch from the waistline, and then I'll place my pocket right sides facing each other just on that 1 inch mark, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine and then I will stitch on a straight line using 1/2 inch. So I'll do that for this piece, and then I'll also do the same thing for the back piece as well. So basically you're attaching your pocket to all four sides of your shorts. We're done attaching the pockets, and this is what I have here. This is for the back piece. So I'm just going to get the front piece now of my shorts. I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. I'm making sure that they align at the sides, all the pockets and the side. I will take this to my sewing machine and run the stitches in 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch all the way to the pocket, and 3/4 inch all the way down. I'll do that for this side, and I'll also do that for this side. And then at the crotch line here, I'm going to hold both pieces together using 1/2 inch from one end to the other end. And after stitching, this is what I have. Both sides are closed and the crotch area. Now to work on the waistband, you'd need to calculate the circumference of what you have on your waistline. So I'll take that again. For the waistband, just calculate the circumference of what you have on your waistline on your shirt. So this is going to be way bigger than your actual waistline. So for me, the total of what I have is about 50 inches. My actual waist measurement is 32 inches, but what I have right here is 50 inches. So that's 50 inches. Then that means the length of my waistband is going to be 50 inches plus half of an inch for stitching both sides together. So this piece of fabric is for my waistband and it measures 50.5 inches, and then the width of this unfold is 2.5. And then this is because my elastic, the elastic I'm using for the waistband is about 2 inches, a little below 2 inches, as you can see, and then the half of an inch I'll be using to stitch this waistband to the actual fabric. Now, to determine the length of the waistband that you need, for me, this waistband elastic stretches a lot. So what I have right here is 28 inches. My actual waist measurement, like I said, is 32 inches. So I took out about 6 inches. So the elasticity of your waist elastic will determine how much you will be deducting from your waist measurement before you cut your elastic for your waistband. Now working on this fabric now, I'm just going to open this up and try to place them right sides facing each other like this. And then I'm just going to take a 1 inch mark here. And then from that 1 inch mark, I'm also going to take another 1 inch mark. And we're pretty much going to be stitching using half of an inch. So I will sew from this point to this point. I will skip this opening. So from this point all the way down there. Open the seams up and then top stitch, but I'll show you what it looks like. So this is it right here. This is the opening, as you can see, and then behind it I pressed open the seams and then I ran a straight stitch to hold both sides together. So now we have our waistband. I just drew this line because I'll be making use of it later on in the tutorial. So here we have our waistband and then the opening is in front. I'm just going to bring my shirt now. And then you want to make sure that the opening, the part where you have the opening, is facing the right side, like your center front fabric. Where you have the opening is facing the right side of your shirt, and then you can pin this down. So I have this pin down. I will just pin it all the way round. So I'm done pinning the my waistband now to my shirt. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and then I will run a stitch attaching both pieces of fabric together. However, at the back here, I'm going to be leaving an opening of about 2 or 3 inches whereby I will pass my elastic through. So I've run the stitch and this is what it looks like. I've attached the waistband to the shirt, and then of course the opening that I made mention of, this is the opening here where I can pass my elastic through, after which I will now run a stitch to close this up. So I'm just going to insert my elastic through the opening, and you just want to make sure that your elastic isn't folding or twisting to one side, so be very careful. Now I'm done passing this round. As you can see, I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine, close this up with a stitch, distribute it evenly, and then close this opening up. Now I'm done with that, as you can see, our short is coming out looking very nice already. I just made sure to distribute the elastic properly all around, and then just for some extras, I'm going to be holding down this elastic on all four sides of my shirt. So I'm pinning the center front, I'm pinning both sides, and then I'm pinning the center back. The reason for doing this is because we're going to be running two lines of stitches on the elastic, and then you want to make sure that when you're running this stitch, that your elastic is well distributed all around your shirt. Like, it's not like some parts have more elastic than the other. So I'll take this now to my sewing machine, and then I will show you how we're going to be running a straight stitch. So this is the opening here. So it's just like whatever you have, just divide it into two. I'm trying to look for the markings that I made earlier on. So I'm just remarking that. I'll run a stitch all the way around, and then I'll run another stitch all the way round. And by so doing, we're creating a casing by which we can pass our rope. Now this is a piece of fabric that I'll be using for my rope. The width of this is 1.5 inches. All I'll do is to fold this in this way, run a stitch all the way to the length of the rope, and then fold it again this way and run a stitch all the way to the length of the rope. The length of the rope totally depends on you. So here I am on my sewing machine, and I just want to show you how I'm running the stitch I made mention of. Please make sure that when you're running this stitch, you stretch your elastic as much as possible. So because this elastic I'm making use of is very flexible, it's actually very easy for me to stretch it. So you keep stretching, and then you stitch. When you get to that end, you move to the other side so that you can create a casing for your rope to pass through. And you also want to make sure that the casing you're creating is wide enough for your rope. And then I'm done creating the casing. Now we're done creating the casing, and this is what it looks like. The elastic effect on the waistline is looking very beautiful. I also went ahead to hem the bottom of our shirt. To finish this up now, I'm going to be making use of a safety pin to pass through the rope, to pass the rope through the casing that we just created. That's why it's important for you to make sure that the casing you're creating is wide enough to accommodate the rope that will be going through it. And after you have passed one end in and out, you also want to make sure that you are evenly distributing it on both sides, just like I'm doing. And then your Ankara elastic waisted shirt is ready. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this tutorial very useful. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And if there are other tutorials you want for me to upload, please leave them in the comment section. Till my next one, bye.